Indra, and Erica. You guys can do your intros, and yeah, we're really excited for you guys to hear what next. Yeah.
Cool. Hi ladies, thank you so much for having us this evening. We're so excited to be here. My name is Indra Gutierrez, and I met a few of you last Friday at the Women's Summit, so I'm really excited to see you guys here again. And I have my own construction company called Gutier, and we're located in Houston, Texas, and we focus on commercial and industrial markets. So I will go ahead and let Erica introduce herself before we go ahead and get started.
Yeah, so my name is Erica D'Eramo. I am the founder and CEO of Two Piers Consulting, and also work with Indra, but we also share the fact that we were UT Embos. So, back to my orange.
Oh yeah.
And that's how we met, because of the MBA program and connecting through that. And so I love the fact that there's a lot of connection with classmates. Like, you never know where those connections are going to go and what kind of professional endeavors you'll end up going on with folks you meet in these programs.
Yes, and so actually, the reason we decided to come, to the center and give this presentation to everybody was because Eric and I work together a lot. So I have a women's empowerment group in my company, and I work in a very male-dominated industry, which means there's not too many women. So I do try to equip, the women that work with me to get them ready, prepared for when they go to the field. Because being in the field is, you're going to be one out of 100. So you have to be ready to face those challenges. So I really do try to prepare them, especially a lot of the women that are graduating right from college. They've never worked anywhere else. They don't know how it is. So I really do try to coach them and prepare them. So, Erica comes and does workshops for my company on a quarterly basis, and we decided to do this particular topic because it's important, and it's the main message that I want to share with everybody is that this is an evolving thing, right? Like, what's your leadership style? Your leadership style will change over time. So you evolve as a human, as a professional. Your career, you're going to have different experiences, right? Different positions. So as you're changing and evolving, so is your leadership style. So it's okay to not have it figured out. I still have to adjust my leadership style. So, and I do it every day. I try to figure out, okay, what works for me, what feels right for me, and it's a trial and error. So my focus is making sure my people are happy to be where they're at, right? That they're excited on the mission of what we're doing, and it's important for me. So I do try to reflect on things that may or may not work for me. And then, I run the company with my husband. He runs the project operations, so he's in the field. And we are both very different. Our leadership styles are very different. So what works for him does not work for me. The way I give feedback is very different than the way he gives feedback. So, it's okay. So it's really, Erica is going to share, her knowledge, her data, her research on, what does this mean? What does leadership style mean to, to us? So I'll be here for any questions as well, but I'm going to pass it on to Erica since she's the expert in this.
Yeah. So this is actually it's a workshop, so we're not just going to talk at you. It's interactive, which means that for once, the person in the room, we really want you to have your phone out, because we're going to use the phones. There's going to be some polling, so that people will have some times where you can speak up and make your voice heard, but sometimes we don't want to be associated with our answer. And so it's anonymous polling, and you can answer freely. But have those phones ready, because there is a lot of material to cover, and we're going to move really quickly. So we want you to just answer with your gut feel and move on, because it's going to go quick. Okay, so my here, legal disclaimer. Basically, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a psychiatrist, seek professional help where needed. And so, content notice. I mean, this is going to be pretty lighthearted today, but I put this on no matter what the topic is because sometimes these discussions, they really do focus our thoughts inward about like who we are, what our values are, and sometimes, you know, some of that's associated with trauma, like what our challenges are and how our behaviors evolve. So I never know where people are at on any given day. We never know where people are at. And so I just put this up here, use this of help. It's changed recently, so if you didn't know that the helpline has changed, now's your time to jot it down. And, you know, if you're doing presentations, I would suggest maybe keeping that in mind as well. But I don't expect anything today that we talk about to be traumatic, but it never is. Okay, we're right off the bat in polling. So, your phone's out, and it's going to tell you that it's not active yet because I haven't advanced the next slide, but this is, should be there. Everybody get the, hold on. Okay, did everybody get the QR code? No. Instructions. We're just, okay. Let's do this. I'll give you more time. They just changed the interface for this, like this week, and so we're gonna have an adventure with polling. Okay. Moving on. So it's Monday afternoon. We're just getting a temperature read for folks. How are people feeling today? You just click on the dot or the circle that looks like how are you feeling?
Mine still says patient.
Oh, really? Okay. Bring it on the fly if needed, so. All right, got some answers coming in. I don't show the answers at first. I wait until we've got a few because of anchoring bias. And as soon as we see someone else's answer, we tend to gravitate towards that. So brainstorming is always best done silently and then bring it together at the end. And that's how you're going to get the best diversity of answers. Okay, so we can start showing now. Some of them are coming through. So just 2 to 3 words describing what type of work. Wow, it's moving quickly. Impactful work, right. Dynamic work, empowerment, entrepreneur, that makes sense. Innovation, creativity, fulfilling. So what we're seeing here, I love that people do, I mean, there is some around like what industry you want to end up in, but there's a lot more about like what impact you want to have in the world, like how you want to present in the world, which is tied to your values. And that's going to be a key theme that we keep touching on throughout this presentation. So remember that. Creative, I love this. And my background, we'll talk about it a little bit more in a moment, but I come from 2 decades in energy, so oil and gas. I wore steel-toed boots through a lot of my career, and then ended up doing like mergers and acquisitions kind of all over the place. Indra also spent a lot of time in steel-toed boots. So like when we do this workshop, or when I do this workshop, in a lot of those environments, it's just like, I want money, I want success, like I just want, and not so much about the impact that people want to have. Engaging, yes, how you want to feel in that work that you're doing. Do we think this might work now? You want to try? Does it show you? It is. Oh, look at that, a little workaround. That's pretty good for a Monday, I gotta say. So the reason I asked a question like this, and this question changes for me, but just getting a sense of yourself. We don't have a ton of time today. I'm gonna move pretty quickly, but normally I'll do like a body scan at the beginning of workshops. Because again, a lot of this is about self-awareness and understanding what our triggers are, like how we behave, what influences us. And so if we are somewhere else and not in the room and present, it's going to be hard to connect to that material. So we're all here. It looks like people are having a pretty good day. That's great. And I'm excited to be here. So it's good. It's just sense check. And anytime you're in a learning environment, really, it's very hard for us to learn if we don't feel safe. So this tells me that we've got a lot of open minds and we're ready to feel, ready to get some learning in. Okay, then this should be the last question for a little bit, but no assumptions here. And when I say leadership experience, I do not mean like just some one standard way of leading. Not like it doesn't need to be in a company. It could be in your school career. It could be, I was a lead tech in the pharmacy I worked at when I was in high school and then up through college. So this is quite different. Okay, so taking on leadership. So nobody has, which makes total sense to me, nobody has not yet started their leadership journey because everybody here is kind of gearing towards entrepreneurship. You're ready to like start leading the way. That's why this is the Trailblazers guide to authenticity. I think that if you are that type that's going to blaze your own trail and kind of like create it yourself, then it makes it even more difficult to find what an authentic leadership style might be for you because you're not surrounded with all of the cookie cutter examples that came before you, right? You really have to create it yourself. And we've got some pros. I would say, despite all of the senior leadership roles I've had, I'm definitely on a lifelong learning journey when it comes to leadership. So why this topic? I think we hear a lot about authentic leadership in the world, a lot of it. And we hear like bring your whole self to work, and we hear a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is what my company focuses on. I'm going to check the time to make sure I don't run over if you get so excited about this that you become time blind. And in reality, authentic leadership is not actually that accessible to everyone because we are showing up with our different intersectionality in the workplace with different pressures and barriers and biases that we're having to navigate as we go through our careers. Some workplaces, you might be able to show up with your true authentic self and have it be accepted. Other workplaces, there's going to be a tension there. And so when we talk about like bring your whole self to work, that's kind of negating some of the reasons that we might not bring our whole selves to work. Some really valid reasons for that. Some really valid reasons that we might not choose authenticity every time. And so I feel like a lot of times this conversation is all like rainbows and balloons and nobody really talks about like what are the risks associated with authenticity. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. Like we're going to talk about how to bring authenticity in safely. But if we don't accept that, we're either leading people astray, like there's a TED talk about like, stop telling women they have imposter syndrome, right? And stop telling people to bring their whole selves to work, Jodie Embury. She talks about this a lot. Sometimes it's not necessarily safe to bring our whole self to work. And so we'll look at how we do that and how we protect ourselves and how we can be effective. So myself and Two Piers. So I mentioned I was in the energy industry for like almost 20 years. I spent a lot of that working in the field, in Azerbaijan, in Alaska, in the country of Georgia. I spent 3 years in Angola working offshore in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on a boat with mostly Brits and Angolans, about 200 of us. I was usually the only woman, and I was second in command out there. That was my first real leadership role, actually. Like, welcome to leadership. Go. And in those environments, like they're pretty high risk, right? People can die. That was always like this thing messing up, like it doesn't present in the back of my mind is always, is everyone gonna go home with all their fingers and toes today? Is like, did anything blow up? Sorry, like, do we have any casualties? If the answer is no, we're fine, right? There was a ton of pressure out there to lead effectively, keep everybody safe, deliver results, and a lot of messaging that the only reason I was there was because of diversity initiatives. The only reason I was there, despite like a really successful career up to that date where I proved myself over and over again, there was a lot of messaging that I shouldn't be there, I wasn't welcome. My boss said those words to me, right? So really tough. That's happened, like, that happens, right? That happens sometimes. But when you're trying to find your leadership style for the first time, and there's no examples of who to look for that you're like, oh, I can replicate that, you're just sort of at a loss. And that is how Two Piers came about, because at that point, I was seeking support, and I found a lot that was geared towards C-suite women, I thought, well, if I can make it out of this job, I mean, I'll be good. Like, once I'm C-suite, I don't know that I need a lot of support, like, on how to operate and how to lead. And there was a lot towards entry level, but there was a real gap on the in-between for how to handle your first leadership role, or just how to, like, survive. And so I know not every environment is going to be that extreme, but I think, like, that type of environment gives a really clear view of what is important, and, like, you can extrapolate from there. So I founded Two Piers in 2016. I kind of took a sabbatical from that role after that and got this company off the ground. That is what led me to the UT MBA program, because I felt like, I don't know the first thing about running a company. Like, I know how to operate in a Fortune 100 company where I have an accounting department, I have a legal department, and I have everything I need at the tips of my fingers. So yeah, I can thank UT for really everything that I've done since then. So what will we cover? Ooh. Okay, before we talk about what will we cover, I'm going to do a little sense check on how familiar folks are. Let me see if I can get, do we still have the code up? Do I need, okay, good. Keep it handy, because we're going to do several crowd. How would you rate your understanding of this topic? This topic being, like, I guess, authentic leadership, but okay, let's see some responses. Wow, cool, that's awesome. We've got some, like, real good understanding here, and we've got a good diversity of understanding. So we'll talk about some resources in here, and I'll highlight some books or authors, and for anyone that's more interested and wants to dive deeper, you can always go find those. And then we are always here for conversation. But I would love, for the people who feel like they've really got this dialed in, I would love for you to contribute as we talk through this. And feel free to interrupt me, by the way. Don't stand on ceremony for me. Okay. So just the learning outcomes for today. Understand the concept of authenticity, how it relates to leadership style. Be able to identify what authentic leadership looks like, but also what it feels like on a personal level, like inside our bodies. Recognize the risks associated with authenticity, particularly for marginalized or underrepresented groups who maybe don't have access to that full suite of behaviors. And then understand ways to effectively mitigate those risks, both in the short term and the long term. And then lastly, we'll focus on some ways that you can develop your leadership style, maybe when you don't have role models within an organization. Okay, so what does this mean to you? Just like, don't overthink it. It's the Rorschach test. So things will scroll through here. Honesty, genuine, leading with conviction and purpose. Love that. Helping others effectively. Vulnerability, this is going to come up again. Effectiveness is going to come up again. Honesty and empathy, well, I love that. Somebody's been writing for Andy. Considerate, being honest and upfront. Considerate is going to be an interesting topic for us to cover, actually. Like, where does the boundary end? Leading with empathy and passion, yes. Creating change, maintaining character. Oh, I love that, maintaining character. Interesting. We can see, though, that even here, there is a diversity of responses for what authentic leadership means to individuals, right? Genuine self into an environment. Or like togetherness, that is definitely interesting. Okay. So the definition of authenticity. The quality of being authentic. It's very helpful, Webster. Okay, then what is authentic, right? So worthy of acceptance, or belief is conforming to, well, I don't need to read this to you, you can read it. But, again, there's a little variability in what we mean when we talk about authenticity, but I think when we're talking about these conversations, it's really kind of in number 3. authenticity as being real or actual, as in conforming to what we already know. So we get a lot of messages about what a leadership style looks like, and we approach that. Somebody who's leading differently than that might cause some cognitive bias, right? Or some cognitive dissonance. So when we're not conforming to an original, when we're not looking like the perceived real or actual, we're causing some waves. So we're generally talking about number 3, but I think that all the different definitions of authenticity really play a part in those challenges that we might feel. Okay, again, looking inward, what does it feel like to live in your authenticity? And I bring these up in the beginning while you guys are answering. I bring these up in the beginning so that as we talk through some of the theory that gets a bit more abstract, that you have that recent memory or that you've just recalled about what it feels like to be authentic, so that you can be applying this to like real life where you've actually faced these situations and it's not just in the abstract. Okay, we've got some responses. Comfortable and empowering. Oh, there's a line here about comfort. Freeing? Yeah, I agree. It feels like a weight has been lifted. Genuine. Oh, there's also some in here about scary and debilitating and depleting, right? So flip sides of the coin. And interesting to start to think about what environment has to do with that and how sustainable some of this is. Fit. That's a loaded word. Fit. Flowy. Oh, like that. When you are operating your true self, that things just flow, right? It feels natural, joyful. Again, big diversity in how this lands for people based on what their experiences have been in the past or what messaging they're getting about, like, just the range of positive to negative in this one slide is quite striking to me. Okay, and then flipping this a little bit, when you feel like your leader is authentic, what does that feel like to you, being on the receiving end of it? Yes. Accepted and heard. Connection. Did said this is the fastest setting, but can you tell I'm from Connecticut? Cool. Yeah. Safe, supportive. Yeah, safe. Encouraging. So we're going to talk about psychological safety. Spoiler alert, it's very much related to authenticity. Invested. Oh, this all sounds like places I want to work, right? Empowered. This is where we want to work. So the prize is big. It's a big prize. To having been on the side of working for somebody that leads with authenticity, you can see why this is a goal worth striving for. Really genuine, valued, yeah. Those sound like people who are united towards a mission and are going to deliver the organization's goals. So just briefly, if we can do this, in 60 seconds each, just turn to the person next to you. Again, we're trying to anchor you on like a memory, perhaps. And normally I would say, like, pick a situation where somebody was truly authentic and share that situation. Just briefly highlight. The most important part is that you're remembering it. But if you can't think of that, think of somebody that like really didn't resonate. Somebody where you felt like, oh, this is not authentic. And preferably somebody that you've worked with, but like also these examples exist in the media. They exist in, it could be a character, right? Like on a TV show, it could be a politician, it could be whatever. But then just note for yourself what made it feel that way. Okay. Go. talks about authentic leadership, you would think that authentic leadership will literally cure all evils, like world peace, cure hunger, yeah, it's great. It's confident, hopeful, optimistic, resilient. It's all the good things. Resilient is a pet peeve of mine, actually, but moral, ethical, all of these wonderful things, right? Why would you not be? But to me, this definition is not really that accessible. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be all the things. So this topic dates back to like 1990 or so, where people really started to talk about authentic leadership as like a hashtag before hashtags. And this handbook of leadership is where it kind of got introduced in the 90s. In 2003, there was a whole book on authentic leadership, and these were kind of like the early years of the development. There is a lot of alignment about what leads to authentic leadership and what the benefits are. So definitely highly, highly associated with trust and psychological safety in teams. And we know, I mean, if you don't know yet, like the impact of psychological safety on team performance is massive. And I don't know how much we talked about in the MBA program, like it was probably in every leadership slide we talked about. So alignment between words and actions is usually what gives us a sense of authenticity. So when somebody says one thing and they do that thing, and where we sense a difference between words and actions, that's where we start to like get the alarm bells that this is inauthentic. Also, there's like a nice model that kind of shows authenticity equals vulnerability. So you're opening yourself up, you're being true, like which entails some vulnerability, plus identity. And identity is rooted in your value system. It's not interchangeable, but really like who you see yourself as, that work you want to do in the world, really comes from what your true values are. And all of our true values are very different. And sometimes we don't even know what they are, right? Like sometimes we don't even know what a value is until a boundary is crossed. And then we realize like, ooh, I am really upset about this. What was the value that was like crossed for me? And sometimes we need to like work backwards, right? Like reverse engineer it to see what the value was for us. Another common theme throughout this work has been comfort with origins. And I think that comes through with the vulnerability and identity piece as well. So being comfortable with your origin story is kind of critical to being able to lead authentically. And if we feel like we've had to become a different person from who we were when we were younger, or that like identity that we had previously, it can make it really challenging to feel like we are leading authentically. And it's kind of like the skeletons in the closet. It might not even be something that's worth hiding, but if we can't get comfortable with what that is and integrate it into like our current self, then that can be a barrier really to leading authentically and not feeling like you're having to hide something. Consciousness, coherence, and consistency. So level iteration. I don't know how easy this is to remember, but it's about being conscious, again, that's self-awareness, understanding like what your values are, what that means to you. Coherence, so again, like what you say is what you do, and there's coherence there, and then that consistency. So over time, people can expect the same results from you in the same situation again and again, and it's not unpredictable. So consistency really speaks to predictability. And then where there's debate. Who here knows Brené Brown? Okay, a couple folks. Anybody know Adam Grant? A couple more folks. Okay, I think they're like BFFs now, but they totally got into it over authenticity, like in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and it was on LinkedIn, and like they were going back and forth with these articles about authenticity. And Brené Brown was saying like authenticity is great, like leading authentically is really important, and it's about vulnerability and it's about empathy. And Adam Grant was like, no, this is all overrated, like people need to be professionals and not like bring all of their stuff into the workplace. And so really the word that we're talking about is sincerity. When it comes down to it, I think they like made amends. They appear on each other's podcasts regularly, so I think it's all copacetic now. But I think really what was going on there was a difference in definition for how they saw authenticity. And so where a lot of the debate comes from, I don't think is about like the true value of it, but how we define it. And again, we all define it kind of differently. So in general, like we use these terms authenticity, vulnerability, sincerity pretty loosely, but they're really quite different. And what they mean to you might not be the same as what they mean to somebody else. And then I think the other element that came up in that discussion was the gender lens, right? How people can act and display emotion, and that range of emotions that they can share is dependent on, how they can do that without backlash or without this cognitive dissonance is dependent on, a lot of intersectionality, all the biases and lenses that we see people through, and gender is one of them. And so emotion, as seen by, enacted by women, is seen differently than emotion enacted by men. Sometimes, not always, right? But often. And so when we advise people to be more vulnerable or be more sincere to bring themselves to work, are we being conscious of like how that might show up for them? If I cry in the workplace, is that okay? Is it not okay? Maybe that is my true authenticity. If I am frustrated with something and I show that, is that going to be interpreted the same for me as it would a black woman, as it would a black man, as it would a white man? Probably not. It's going to land differently. And so I'm not saying that it should be that way at all, right? And we're not operating in reality if we don't understand how we are being perceived and how that affects us. And that's why I think like having a clear understanding before we say things like bring your whole authentic self to work is really important. So they did get into it about the gender thing. I think Renee accused Adam of something. Okay, so I'm interested, what are some of the risks that people foresee with being authentic? Anybody want to speak up? Yeah.
Maybe like getting labeled.
Labeled?
In a certain way, like, yeah, like what you're saying, if you're like emotional, like, and it's like, oh, she's like weak.
Yeah, yep. Or not predictable, right? That's that whole coherence thing and the consistency. I agree. What are some other risks? Yeah.
Being misunderstood.
Yep, misunderstood. Because we're not getting the true message that's trying to come through. Yeah.
Being perceived as just not professional or not being taken seriously.
Yep. When men are seen as being really passionate about something and women are seen as being like emotional about it. Yeah.
Being seen as not like overcoming or hardworking. Like if you express that you're going through something, it seems like, oh, you have weakness or whatever. You're not good at what you do.
Right, exactly. And now that's not going to be the same in every work environment, right? Like I hope that some of us, most of us have gotten to work in environments where we can show up and be like, you know what? My cat just got diagnosed with cancer and I'm really, really sad today, right? We don't all work in those work environments. We all strive to. And that's the real work that I'm trying to do here, but by empowering people to like survive long enough, I want to give everybody the oxygen packs so that they can go in and undo these toxic work environments and create like the breathable atmosphere. So everything you're learning here, I hope, will help you create those positive work environments where people can be authentic and they can display their emotion. And it's not like you're not focused on work. Any others before we move on? No. Oh, yeah.
I think there's a level of rejection because now it's personal.
Yeah, plus in that vulnerability, like once you open yourself up, it's so much deeper when that rejection comes after you were vulnerable, right? Like it's safer to kind of not be. Sometimes it can feel that way. Yeah.
I think it's what you were saying, like the fear of not knowing how you'll be perceived. Like
Yeah.
that in itself.
Yeah.
Just like the unknown.
Yeah, 100%. Those are risks, right? And those risks, we weigh them differently, but whenever I hear, I just like commented about this on somebody's post on LinkedIn today, this whole like, oh, women should just advocate for themselves more. Okay, well, if we're not advocating for ourselves, maybe we are assessing the risk in front of us and making an informed decision based on that risk. And there are different ways that we can advocate that don't incur backlash or that like don't create this cognitive dissonance, and we can explore that. But whenever we I feel like we write off the way women behave sometimes as irrational, and yet really we're just perceiving risk and acting rationally for those moments. But sometimes we don't even realize it. And sometimes we haven't done the work to understand what the true risk is. So when you verbalized it just now you can do something about it. Now you can say like, okay, this is the risk I'm perceiving. This is why I feel like I can't be authentic. Is this real? Is this a risk I maybe want to take? Like maybe the negative consequences of this risk is one you're willing to take. But until you verbalize it, it's just kind of like the big scary thing that like sits in your chest or on your shoulders or somewhere. So, you know, Brene says it wonderfully. Like if we want more authenticity and vulnerability, we'll do the damn work to create the environments that people can show up and be authentic and themselves. Okay, there's no more sections here, are there? There's one. Oh, we got another question. No numbers in there. That's okay. Okay. So have you ever experienced time? Oh yes, 400%. All right. Well, there we go. So we know this intuitively. We know in our bodies, like sometimes we do have to make choices about how there's a lot of conversation right now in the neurodiversity world about masking or, you know, camouflaging ourselves and which pieces we do bring, because sometimes you have to make a choice about how effective you want to be or how successful you want to be and how authentic you feel to be. So what are the challenges? We talked about some of them. These societal biases around displays of vulnerability or emotion, that's a big one. I feel like, you know, there's a bit of like let them eat cake sometimes around this. So sometimes we're conforming just to survive. Like we just want to survive the environment, we have to conform. I hope none of you future leaders create environments where that's the case. Now that you know, you have a responsibility to change it. But really, if we want to thrive, if we truly want to be successful, it's not going to happen in that conforming to survive mode. It's in the differentiating to thrive. So finding out what it is that's different about you that you can compete on, right? That you can stand out from the crowd and that you can lean into. Another challenge is competing responsibilities, because we're all balancing, sometimes seamlessly, sometimes not seamlessly, an obligation to ourselves to take care of ourselves. That's really why we're there usually, right? Like we want fulfillment, or we want financial stability, or we want something out of this engagement. If you're in a leadership position, your employees, your teammates, like you have a responsibility to them too. So this is where like Adam Grant's authenticity is selfishness comes in. If you're being authentic, but at the detriment of everyone around you because you're taking up all the oxygen in the room, as a leader, that's something you need to look at to balance. And then to the organization, like what are you there for? What's the shared mission of the organization? And that's always in the mix as well. So being authentic to yourself, treating your employees and your teammates with respect and, you know, looking out for them, and then keeping that overarching mission of the organization in mind. And sometimes with your intention, and there is no right answer, right? Just being aware of it. Because oftentimes we're operating in these modes and we're not even aware of it. We feel the tension. Sometimes it keeps us up at night. We don't know why. It's usually because like one of those three is in tension or is crossing a value boundary for us. Then there's a challenge that I think is particularly hard for some of us, like myself. When you're in an organization, you want to connect with people. There is a balance between that personal closeness and the social distance that's required to lead properly. So we want to bond, we want to create empathy, we want to get to know the people that we're leading as human beings, and it can be very difficult to lead if you are also best friends with a person, to give them a performance review, to give them feedback, and to do it in the view of the organizational goals. So I think that this is particularly applicable for women because we are socialized to connect together and through like shared experiences, through power sharing. So while men are kind of taught, or like little boys are socialized to like compete, to form a hierarchy, little girls are often not. And this is a broad generalization. It changes based on culture, it changes based on socioeconomic background, But in general, little girls are taught to like not piss people off with what they need by saying what they need out loud. So we find other ways to voice our needs. And to not be like the tall poppy, right? So we kind of want social cohesion. So it'd be very, very difficult to then balance personal closeness with social distance. And then kind of keep that boundary or keep that barrier when you really want to be close to the people you work with. Again, there is no right answer, but at least being aware of it, you can kind of monitor and see like what works for you and what doesn't, or where you've had mishaps to look back and wonder like maybe this was an underlying issue. And then as Indra mentioned, the ever-evolving self. What's natural for you in your 20s, going to be different in your 30s, going to be different in your 40s. Your values will morph, they'll change, they'll evolve. What feels right and authentic to you will change and evolve. And so hopefully not like black and white night versus day, but it will evolve over time. So there is no like single self. It's always evolving, we're always growing. That's a big piece of Adam Grant's kind of literature on this as well. What not to do. So there are some like what not to do's, right? It's not very effective to beat people at their own game. So when I was offshore, there was a lot of pressure, right? To like lead like a dude. Just yell at people and intimidate them and like talk down, hierarchical, command and control. And I mean, I tried it for a little while. It didn't fit, and I was never going to, there was always going to be a double bind. I was never going to outman the men. That was never what I could compete on best. And it's freaking inefficient. It's incredibly inefficient. You are taking all of the skills and the blessings and all of the wonderful things that you bring to the table and leaving those behind and going after the thing that's not your skill set, not your natural way of operating, and not how you were socialized. So there can be a lot of pressure to do that. It's just not that effective to try to beat them at their own game. Doing violence to your conscience. This is something that they'll tell you if you're ever in a hung jury, which I was for a murder trial, and it was really wild. But the judge still told us when we couldn't come to an agreement, like, you must not do violence to your conscience. And that stuck with me for a long time. So that means like going to bed at night and not being able to sleep because you feel like something is off, right? You feel like that sickness in the pit of your stomach. So acting outside of your value system is kind of what we mean with that, doing violence to your conscience. If it's going to keep you up at night, it's not sustainable. Don't equal to command and control. I know sometimes when we feel like we're backed into a corner, that can be the easiest thing to do, right? Just like tell people what to do. I think maybe that works for some people. Well, there's a certain portion of the segment of the population I think it works very well for. Doesn't work for many of us though. Many of us in this room, it would not necessarily work. You might get the outcome in the short term that you are looking for. It's fine in crisis situations, right? Like stuff is blowing up, you have to go to command and control. But if you use this as a default, it destroys psychological safety. And it's really hard to recover once you've destroyed psychological safety on a team. And that's a precious thing to try to protect at all costs. And then differentiating based on technical skill. This is another thing that women tend to do. Like, well, I'm just going to be the best damn engineer. I'm just going to be the best accountant. I'm going to be so quick with those numbers. That's great. You might succeed in a technical realm, but if your ambition is to be a leader, you need to be differentiating based on leadership skills, right? Otherwise, you're going to end up in a technical path. People are going to be like really good with the numbers or really good with whatever market strategy, but doesn't have that leadership style. So again, it can be tempting. Recognize the temptation, understand where it's coming from, and maybe question whether that's the most effective path for you. Okay, we are going to stick to that. So what works? Understanding your values and motivators. This is like something we've talked about a lot now, but we don't do it. We don't act, if I asked you like, what are your values right now? How many folks could just like write down their top 5 values? Yeah? Okay, okay, well maybe because you're doing that in school, right? Like sometimes we go through programs, you get like a list of values, you start to circle them, but it takes thought. And if we haven't like written that down and maybe revisited it in some time, it's not a given that we understand what is motivating to like introduce them and see how it resonates, see how it goes. And then little by little, like you can bring your true authentic self in, but you don't need to go all in right at once unless you feel like it's okay, like the downside risk is okay for you to handle. So if you have like all the financial freedom in the world, great. Be the person that takes the risk because a lot of people don't have that freedom or that privilege. If you don't have like the cushion to be able to take those kinds of risks, find little bits that'll give you a signal of how safe it is. And then, if it's not safe, you can start charting your path out, because living outside your true authentic self for like extended periods of time is doing violence to your conscience, and it's not sustainable. It's exhausting. So once you start to see like what you can read the room, then you can start deciding whether like you want to stick around and try to make this work, or you want to try to do something else. And for those of you who are entrepreneurs and are going to lead your own organizations, you'll still kind of have to see how this resonates with the team that you've built, right? Like how you can evolve and change. And then, worst case scenario, if things are tense and you feel like there's really not alignment about how you can communicate, how you can be your true authentic self, you can always default just to respectful interaction. So ensure that you're always being respectful to yourself, forget that a lot, and that, default is just to be respectful to others, even if they don't like who we are, even if they don't like us being authentic. That doesn't mean let stuff slide. It just means you don't need to be like super nice to them, and you don't need to give them your anger. And then look to examples that you admire. So we're gonna skip this one because we've got like 3 minutes. Sometimes there are no examples, so we talked about that. So what do we do when there's no examples? External mentors are great. These kind of organizations are great because there's like alumni that you can look to find people outside of your organization. When you're doing that, try to find similar organizational cultures, not just industries, right? Because sometimes like companies within the same industry can have vastly different cultures. If you look at Amazon versus Salesforce, right? Vastly different cultures, so focus on culture if you're trying to find somebody outside. Professional coaches, it's a shameless plug, but really they can help play some of this back to you and give you perspective. You can find lower stakes external leadership opportunities like the PTA or the Historical Society or a volunteer opportunity where you can test some of this out. Mind you, if it's not the same makeup as the organization you are leading, like in your day job, it's not necessarily transferable, but you can see what feels right to you at least. And then, worst case scenario, identify those anti-role models. As you go, you're gonna see things that you're like, nope, don't wanna do that, don't wanna do that, can't lead like that. That's a boundary cross for me, and you can be making notes of that as you go. And then we talked about planning your exit strategy. If there are no leaders like you in an organization, if you're coming up through an organization, nobody looks like you, nobody acts the way you would like to act, then it might not be sustainable. Doesn't mean leave right away, but maybe start charting your exit, right? Seeing what other opportunities are out there. I say this at the end because I feel like so many people are like, oh, I read that biography of so-and-so, and they're so amazing. Most of those biographies are PR pieces, so they don't put all the nitty-gritty stuff in there that, where like the rubber hit the road or where they had to question their values. So just take it with a grain of salt, because I think where we really learn from people is where it all falls apart. You don't see that a lot. Okay, couple takeaways. If you guys don't mind, quickly, give me like 1 or 2 words about what you're taking away from this session. And this is more for you than for me. So even if you can't answer quickly, you can at least mentally think about it. When we walk through those doors, there's going to be a mind wipe. We're going to forget a lot of what we just listened to. So if you just remember like one thing and recall it right now, it's much more likely to stick with you when you leave. Yeah? Okay. Let's see. Responses. And that's because they're too slow, so self-trust. Okay, great. Like these. Can't always be best friends with those that you are leaving. Or maybe you just change jobs so that you can still be best friends, but just not leave them. Awareness, knowing yourself. Okay, moving on. What's one new behavior or pattern or behavior you plan to implement? I'm not going to make you answer this one. I do want you to say the words to yourself in your brain. Think about it. How is this actually going to look next week, next year, when you are looking to take on this leadership assignment. Okay, and then this one's really helpful. This one is for me to see before and after. There's no right answer actually. I joke about this, but it might have been that everybody answered a 5 at the beginning. I don't think that was what it was, but maybe everybody answered a 4, and now that I've kind of like dumped all this stuff on you, you're like, whoa, I'm at a 2, because I have a lot of reading to do, and that's okay too. But it is helpful for me to see. We're a public benefit corporation, so I monitor these metrics to see kind of how we're doing and how effective our presentations are. Okay, cool. I like that. Thank you, I appreciate that. I'll flip through these quickly, but these are additional resources. This one on the left, very interesting, very white male centric, so take it with a grain of salt. All the reading that's quite popular. Brene Brown, Kim Scott. Start with why. We all know Simon Sinek. I have mixed feelings about Simon Sinek. I do think his stuff around like why are we here, what are we doing, what is our core value, what's the mission, that can be really helpful when we're finding our authentic leadership. This is the TED Talk I mentioned. Jody and Burry. Brene Brown's Daily podcast. I think a lot of us listen to that. And then that's kind of it. This is that's a link to our website. We do coaching, consulting, workshops like this. And if you ever have ideas about workshops that you would like to see, please, I'm always looking for what is on top of mind. Okay. Whew. Did it
I would like to add a few words, to end this session, but I will say, you ladies that are going out into the, working world, is stay true to your values. The road is very challenging. Your boundaries will be tested. Your values will be tested. So be ready to be able to take on those challenges because they're going to come. And as you move on, whether you're in corporate or you start your own company, they're going to come over and over again to where you do have to reevaluate who you are, what's important to you, why you're doing what you're doing. And I would say, really hone into your strengths because there's a lot of qualities that we have and what really makes you unique, stick to it. And you will have people, in your corner to really be there for you. I have some of the best advisors in business in the U.S., like really mentoring me, supporting my business. And they tell me, we do it because, the data is there too. Women that are running companies are usually very profitable, and it's the attention to detail that we have, and it's the way we deliver, the way we measure our metrics. There is a lot of positive things about, what we bring. So whenever you enter the world and it's very, there's a lot of, it's very male dominated, is, stay true to who you are and always try to improve. There's always room for improvement. I continue, I'm a lifelong learner, so always seek to be better than you were the day before. And that's the advice that I want to share with all of you. And thank you so much for having us this evening. You guys are for your time.
We're going to answer any Q&A afterwards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to you guys, Erica and Indra. Thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you all for being here and joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed the session. And have a good night, everyone.